Without your help in this location, this event would have far less of an impact. Our purpose is straightforward: to provide rich dialogue centered around defense innovation and preparation for Fed Supernova and other upcoming events. We're going to do this through presentations from our panelists. They'll come in two groups. Our first group of three will kick off immediately following this introduction to speak on the strategic insights of interoperability and innovation. Following their presentations, we'll open it up for question and answer and then take a short break, a very short break, for transition to the second panel. That'll launch right after that break, obviously, with a bit of change of content. They'll focus on tactical and the technical part or side of innovation, interoperability, and innovation. Then once again, we'll open it up, and we'd love to hear your insights and questions on that panel. We've asked each of the panelists to open up with where they work, what's their focus, and maybe their unique perspective on defense innovation, and then provide some insights, of course, on interoperability. Today, we're discussing interoperability and innovation. My preface is that our national security strategy and defense strategies identify our strategic center of gravity as our extensive network of allies and partners. Without their assistance, we cannot manage risk worldwide in this great dynamic we call great power competition. Thus, it's incredibly important, call it critical, to find ways to empower our allies and partners as we endeavor to conquer evil in that dynamic GPC environment. So, always good to start off with a definition when you get into a thick subject like this, interoperability. So Joint Pub 1-02, and sorry to go straight Joint Pub on you, defines interoperability as the ability of systems, units, or forces to provide services to and accept services from other systems, units, or forces, and to use the systems so exchanged to enable them to operate effectively together. Thanks to the Joint Staff for a confusing definition. There are three types of interoperability: technical, to include hardware, equipment, armaments, and systems; procedural, doctrines and procedures; and human, those like terminology and training, and of course, relationships. We are, of course, going to discuss today how the defense ecosystem keeps an eye on interoperability so that America doesn't out-innovate its allies. We'll also discuss how defense ecosystems of startups, VCs, industries, academia, and nonprofits can catalyze interoperability. And we're hopefully going to hear who's doing interoperability well, from our allies and partners to new startups and industry partners. And of course, we'd love to hear your thoughts on the importance of interoperability in this grand defense innovation. My goal is that by the end of today, that you'll have a thorough understanding of interoperability and defense innovation, and you'll be able to make informed decisions and add to the dialogue on this topic. In addition, we hope that this will expand our collective networks as we effort to bolster the success of the Army and the DoD. And lastly, I'm hoping we reveal some routes and resources so you know where to go if you want to learn more or about this subject or any other subject that relates to defense innovation. So let me get started and introduce you to our speakers. I'm sure many of you know them, but if you don't, here we go. Colonel Matt Bonini is a seasoned armor officer with nearly 25 years of Army service. Matt's service includes time at West Point, U.S. SOCOM, JSOC, and garden spots like Iraq, Afghanistan, and Austin. In addition to his many combat deployments, Matt taught at West Point and provided data science to SOF operators worldwide. His deployed tactical data exploitation teams, TDETs, at JSOC won the 2019 U.S. SOCOM Lamberson Award for Innovation in Support of Operations. He earned his master's at Colorado School of Mines and PhD at CMU. Matt's a former West Point football player and boxer who enjoys watching his kids strive in athletics at Lake Travis High School. Next, Joy Schonenberger, the founder and CEO of Boone, a firm delivering intelligence, automation, and technology integration to sensitive government customers. Joy is often tapped to lead situations deemed as FUBAR, scenarios where others may believe there's no path forward. She's always able to find a way. Joy is a seasoned defense acquisition professional and serves as a board member with Defense Entrepreneurs Forum, Human First Coalition, and Antidote Life Foundation. She's a Forbes Business Council member, TEDx speaker, member-elect of the Young Presidents Association, and member-elect of the Atlantic Council. Joyce spends her free time training as a semi-professional competitive boxer, where she continues to donate all her winnings to veteran organizations. Next is Ross Gibb, the Executive Director of the George H.W. Bush Combat Development Complex, or BCDC, at Texas A&M University, Rellis Campus in Bryan, Texas. He provides oversight for a unique ecosystem of state-of-the-art facilities, researchers, staff, and faculty, organized and focused to accelerate priority DoD technologies from lab to field. This includes developing strategic partnerships across DoD, academia, and the defense industrial base. BCDC represents a more than $200 million combined investment from Texas A&M University System, the state of Texas, and Army Futures Command. Ross was the first XO to the commanding general at Army Futures Command, where we met 2018 to 2020. A decorated combat veteran, Ross retired in 2020 as a colonel with 29 years of service. Evan Adams on our second panel, back over there, which you'll meet later, is a seasoned armored cavalryman, like the tone here, a product manager at the new software factory at Army Futures Command. The Army's recognized Evan's work in innovation in support of the COVID response and vaccination implementation at Fort Campbell, cloud service implementation at 18th Airborne Corps, as well as creation of multiple web and mobile applications in support of training management, the Afghanistan retrograde, and workflow processing. Evan hopes to continue his focus supporting the warfighter during the transition from the industrial age to the information age. Next is Alex Height. Alex, raise your hand. Thanks. Vice President of Partnerships and Strategy at Visimo. Alex leads Visimo's government sales strategy by combining his passion for innovative technology, policy analysis, and people. Alex earned his BA at Rhodes in International Studies and his MPA in Policy Research and Analysis from University of Pittsburgh. He's a huge barbecue fan and would like to know your favorite barbecue spots that he can visit while he's in town. And then lastly, Angela Esposito, Senior Vice President of Strategy and Growth at MKS2, an Austin-based defense contractor. She's responsible for leading the strategy and growth teams, laser focused on finding success for MKS2 every single day. Angela's always been a disruptor. As a child, she was known as the wild kid, constantly challenging those around her. As an adult, she quickly learned that the criticality was to ask politely, and now uses that approach to identify and solve challenges each day. Angela holds a bachelor from Purdue University and an MBA from Notre Dame, where she met her boss, Brandon Mullen. Under her leadership, MKS2 has experienced four consecutive years of double-digit revenue growth and quadrupled in size while working with the Army, the Navy, the VA, SOCOM, and the IC. When she's not crushing it at MKS2, you might find her at an ice rink. One of her greatest joys is watching her husband and their three kids play ice hockey. In addition to being an excellent strategist, Angela is also an accomplished sommelier. So today's agenda is quite simple. As I alluded to before, following this introduction, we'll hear from panel one, already here, Matt Bonini, Joy Schonenberger, Ross Gibb. Take a short break, and then we'll launch into panel two, where we'll hear from Major Adams, Alex Height, and Angela. And as we near about 1600, we'll wrap up and hear from Meg Vrabel about Fed Supernova. Lastly, before I get started, we're especially pleased to have you here, our audience, with us today. Your insights and opinions are what give occasions like this the richness and the depth that make them great. If you have ideas about this, T did, and how to do the next one even better, or if I don't get your question or ideas today, feel free to shoot me or Mike Garlington an email. I'm sure he'll pass out his cards, because we'd really love to continue to collaborate on this issue. So with that, I'd like to introduce Matt Bonini, Chief Data Officer at Army Futures Command. Sir, the floor is yours.
There we go. Got to be 10% smarter in your equipment. The Secretary of the Army has told us we need to move towards data-centric operations. And I think that means data literacy and computational literacy are now core competencies for the warfighter. And that means we can no longer fully outsource those things. So as we start to talk about innovation and interoperability, I think talent is a huge component of that. So I'll briefly talk about the work we're doing my directorate's doing at AFC, and then one project that kind of moves towards, I think, stronger infrastructure to enable innovation with non-traditional partners. So my directorate really provides two functions for the headquarters here. The first, we provide analytics support to the headquarters staff. But believe it or not, when you walk around our headquarters staff, you often see enterprise data pipelines characterized by collection via Excel, transport via Outlook, and decision support via PowerPoint, right? So what my team has done has started to instrument the front end of those pipelines, get more clean, consistent data, unbeknownst to the end user, warehouse those in an Azure PaaS data service, and we've slowly built an ontology and a data fabric that's kind of driven down the cost for decision support within the command. So what we've found is that by integrating our uniformed and contract talent directly with that customer, so our operational leaders, they are participating in every sprint. They've started to see, hey, if I give guidance here, the thing actually changes. My life changes. And what we've found is that the operational leaders or intelligence leaders in my last job, they're the ones driving the direction of these technical teams. So our joke is, if you're a technical team, as long as you're choosing your own adventure, you're not relevant yet. And we've quickly gotten to a point where general officers and directors there are sitting down and thinking about how they can drive change with technology. And I think that's moving us towards data and computational literacy at appropriate levels. The next service my team provides is cloud platform services. And being tightly coupled with our branch providing direct customer support, it's helping us use that close attention to a team that's delivering directly to a customer to build services that are broadly usable by the rest of the modernization enterprise. There's one project I'd like to kind of walk through because I think it speaks to the topic today of interoperability. So Project Convergence is our vanguard exercise at Army Futures Command. And we say that the concept of convergence, think the battlefield of things, right? So any sensor anywhere on the battlefield could acquire a target, and we would have a system of systems that allows us to choose the best fire solution to deliver effects on that target and do that across many targets. So it's really a human-machine teaming effort. We don't think that kill chain ever gets humans fully out of that loop, but a system of systems that can pass that information and help humans make decisions much more rapidly. So we go out to the desert every year, and we take relatively new technologies and try to incorporate those onto this battlefield of things to deliver those effects. So we have what we call sensor-to-shooter threads. You can think of them as a data pipeline with several new and legacy technologies on the network, seeing if we can pass that information. And when we go out there, I would argue that right now, the cost of testing for those capabilities is relatively high. And I think that's for two reasons. One, our networks historically, we have thought of them as a means to pass voice traffic. I mean, we've been passing data for a while, but the volume of machine-to-machine communication required on these networks now has increased significantly. And we don't necessarily have the mechanisms internal to our institution to do that with new technologies well, right? So typically, integration is performed by the acquisition community a little bit farther right with technologies that are a bit more mature. So how can we drive down that cost? And what my first trip out to Yuma last year, I'd sit in the back of the room at the end of the day. So for weeks leading up to this exercise, there's basically rehearsals and iterations going on to get these sensor-to-shooter threads to flow properly. And as someone with a software background, I mean, basically, we were conducting manual interoperability testing and change management in the desert with contractors from various companies. Not easy to do. So we think at the logical layer, you could drive down the cost of that with things that are, at this point, basic fundamentals in microservice cloud deployments, right? So could you provide industry with, one, a cloud-based open virtual platform that looks a lot like the experimentation network, but available to a non-traditional partner? Two, open interoperability standards for experimentation that maybe aren't as closely guarded as our integration standards farther downstream, but allow non-traditionals to engineer to a standard that they know will be interoperable in the experimentation environment. Also, a sensor to shooter thread, so sensors A, B, and C pick up a given target, let's say, and then we've got a C2 system that helps us deduplicate sensor reports and decide is this 3 separate tanks or 1, and then the transmission of that to a correct shooting platform and a correct ballistic solution, et cetera. Those all could be written as interoperability tests, unit tests, et cetera, in that framework. So we're in the process of building a crater right now and working with a nonprofit partner to build what we're calling a virtual interoperability proving range, where we're basically providing an environment where we give you, if you would like, a standard containerized image that maybe abstracts away some of the things as a small company you don't want to engineer, like our API standards, how to STIG for security controls so it passes our DISA checks to get on our network, et cetera. So with that partner now, we think that helps us in a couple of ways. One, we should be able to use that as a proof of concept and then make that environment available to any industry partner. Two, what about times where a capability is more likely to include several technologies that small businesses could compete towards, but what small business wants to share their IP with 2 other small businesses to see if that truly becomes a capability? If we did this right, the barrier for testing for interoperability would be much, much lower. So I just used that vignette. That's a small project we're working on right now. But that is what I mean by growing the technical competencies inside the uniformed and civilian force that allows us to much better leverage talent from industry. And then just the last piece I'll hit on, and I know we've got representatives from the software factory here as well. Every place I have gone in the Department of Defense, where we have invested in giving repetitions to uniformed and civilian talent, it allows us to integrate with industry at a much higher level. It allows us to know exactly what we're starting to ask for and maybe not hand you the proposed solution, but at least not lob over the fence, an ill-defined problem and wait for some solution to come back, right? So with that, I'll yield my time. Thanks.
Before you start, Joe, I'm going to double click on something. So for many of the IT professionals in the room, there's this ugly word, 3-letter word called ATO. And when you go to PC22 or you create this virtual interoperability range, what's the ATO barrier? Or is there one? Do you think it's lessened?
Yeah, I think if we could provide, one, some of the work that Software Factory is doing now, where we're starting to have a true CI/CD pipeline, where we've automated the testing, which in my opinion is more effective, right? So as we're starting to have ATO procedures that are more analogous to what we see in industry, that helps. Additionally, if we can provide essentially machine images that you can build on top of, that helps reduce some of that. I think that also buys down that barrier a little bit. Another thing we've done is we've, in some cases, set up what we call excursions, where newer technologies can maybe be off the combat network for the experiment, but still illustrate their capabilities.
No, thanks for that. All right, Joy, your turn.
Great, thanks. It's nice to know that you're a fellow boxer. I love that. Yeah, one of my favorite boxing lessons is timing beats speed, precision beats power, right? And I think that that's actually very relevant to what we're talking about today. Timing beats speed, I actually think is factually incorrect, because I do think we need to go faster in terms of talking about defense innovation and then actually achieving it and figuring out a metric of what that means. But if I blended the timing and speed equation, I would sustain it down to velocity, right? Which for me is speed in the right direction, and that is all about timing. I think we're in a lot different place. I'm a product of Detroit. I'm very proud and loud about that. So World War II and the arsenal of democracy and everything that the city was able to, flip an entire industry to produce for the war, I constantly look for lessons. And at that point in time, the threat was very fixed, right? The objective was outbuild Hitler. Pretty scary, also pretty simple. It's like fixed threat that we know what to do. And today it's just not like that at all. So I'm constantly, taking what I learn in the ring, which is funny, and apply it to defense innovation. A little bit about me: I'm the CEO of Boone Group. Started the company 6 years ago because I'm a martyr for punishment. No, we have a great time. But in actuality, I came out of a big defense acquisition background, so ACAT level 1 programs, right, like billions and billions of dollars. Then down to the small businesses, and I was part of the inside scoping, for better or for worse, right, as we were designing the Strategic Capabilities Office and the Defense Innovation Unit and things like that. And, there's a lot of lessons that we learned at the first couple iterations, and obviously a lot has evolved over the past handful of years. But the moment that I said, hey, I actually need to flip outside government and go try my hat in the commercial sector, I'll never forget it. One of my other duties as a signed bucket, which in government we all know what that's like, was taking a look at the root cause analysis on what's called dignified transfers. And for those of you that don't know, a dignified transfer is if somebody's fallen in battle and they get processed through Dover, Delaware. And I'm looking at the root cause analysis, meaning was it preventable, right? And there's obviously no single point of failure in war, obviously. But if their, for example, software-defined radio didn't work, if we could have deployed, secure code faster, if anything could have been preventable to make that result not the case, that's where I became immensely passionate. And I'll never forget, it was trip number 37, and I was like, all right, I've had enough. I'm gonna go figure out this thing and try to build essentially a commercial version of a rapid capabilities office, right? And what we started out doing was, how do I just simply find better tech for the government? What does this look like? And this, by the way, we were too early to market, and I will publicly admit that. This is before all the Innovation X and things like this existed, right? So people are like, what are you talking about? What? So we built this, what we call the technology engine. How do I actually hunt for products on the edge and get them into government, right? Well, I thought that was gonna be really easy. That's a cute joke. So, we could find the technologies, we could find the small businesses like the Parasantis of the world, and kind of, oh, there's a mic, cool. And navigate them into, into the Pentagon. And then the next problem that we had to tackle, which this definitely gets into interoperability, was the lovely C word, contracting, right? So we're like, dang, we can find all these technologies, we can't get them on contract. So then we had to build our contracting engine. And we were doing that for about 2 years, really, really focused on commercial tech and getting them into DoD, right? And then where we landed after doing that for 24 months pretty successfully, we realized there was this major gap, which a lot of your remarks I resonate with. And the gap was clear technical talent, right? So we could find the technologies on the edge. We could even kind of finagle them through an OTA process to get them on 1 or 2 contracts and kind of pray and hope that we could grow it. But then there was this massive gap on technical upskilling, right? So that overlap of technology and talent is really where we're focused, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how many ACAT level 1, 2, 3, or 4 programs we have, how big our new tank program is. At the end of the day, who do you send to the front lines when all of that stuff fails? people, whether they're contractors, civilians, or uniform. Like that's the, Hail Mary ripcord. So for us, our focus right now is how do we actually merge our technology engine with our talent engine. And how that's manifested today is we have upskilled over 15,000 military veterans and military spouses for free in technical jobs. And one thing that we have learned through that is the jump in testing of, does somebody have 25 years of experience as a systems admin and can they come be in my CSOC to, manage the ATO process? That's really, really hard if we're going to move at velocity, which I was talking about in the beginning, right? So we've proven that you can actually test for aptitude. We can test that. Remind me, Ross, what was your MOS previously?
I was 11B and then I was a 31 Alpha.
Okay, 11B, for people who don't know what 11B and 31 Alpha is.
Infantryman and then I was a military police officer.
Okay, so infantry and military police officer. So for Ross, maybe, he's in 29 years, right? And is not gonna necessarily say, hey, I'm gonna be really happy and fulfilled being a cyber threat hunter, the famous term flying a desk, right? I'm not going to be happy doing that. We've actually proven that you can test an infantry guy or gal and say, hey, you have the aptitude to learn this skill set, and we can upskill you at the same pace that Army Software Factory is pumping out products and integrate you into that fold. And I think, along the backdrop of interoperability, I think it comes down to two things. One is talent, which I'm very passionate about clearly, as well as some of the remarks you just heard. But the second piece, and I think the piece that nobody is talking about at all, is how do you actually partner small businesses with the contract owners? And we're very lucky. We have a great relationship. We, Boone, have a great relationship with IBM, and we're building reps and building things together, right? But what happens a lot of times is these small businesses, whether they're services or technology, get stuck in this weird middle because of all the consolidation at the top, and then innovation and interoperability actually doesn't happen. So I'm very passionate about partnering with the right people, figuring out how to measure success along that backdrop, and actually build reps together to get the right technology in the field and upskill the talent pipeline across the U.S. government contractor personnel.
That was awesome. I don't have any double clicks on that. Ross, give us your standpoint.
Yeah, so I'm here really to make these two look good. So right away, I'm accomplishing my mission, right? So one of the things that everybody realizes in the military is we're huge, and just think about your days going to NTC and JRTC. If you're an enabling force, and then getting ready to go, you meet at the last minute, and you can't communicate. Period. Before you go into the box, and it takes weeks to figure out how to communicate, and that means you're not working on the repetitions that Matt spoke about, right? You're not working on that because you're just trying to figure out how to communicate. Then you go in the box and figure out why there was a massive failure of part of your organization. It's because all those enabling units that they're not streamlined into the same types of processes or the same types of tech. It just didn't happen. You didn't practice together. So think about how we're going to modernize the Army writ large, and let alone our allies, right? So when I was at, before I was General Murray's XO, I was Secretary McCarthy's XO, and we'd have these big meetings after AUSA that's coming up, and all the GH from Five Eyes would turn up, and what they would tell us is, hey, listen, we need to know which way you're going so we can make investments in the same areas, because our budgets are not as big as yours. So if you're going to go in a direction, we need to know so we can make those same investments. And don't change your decisions midstream, because it really crushes a country like the UK or like England or Australia or whomever was at those meetings, right? It becomes very difficult. So how do we do that, across a large global enterprise, let alone just the United States or just DoD? One of the things that we focus on at the Bush Combat Development Complex is integrated hypersonics, so directed energy and all that. And we're building some fantastic facilities for hypersonics, directed energy, laser diagnostics. But then on the other side is, and that's a one-off facility. It'll be, when finished, 1 kilometer long. It'll be able to do things that other facilities can't do. But on the other side of the runway is a 140-acre innovation proving ground for proving grounds. And really what that is a place where you can try things, do things on 3 5G networks on your own, right? We welcome small, startups. We welcome medium, and we welcome large primes to do their testing there and, learn, test, learn, fix, and then go back out and test again. You heard about the investments, so $50 million of the investments of the original $200 million came from the state of Texas, and really that's focused on ensuring the innovation proving ground can work with all our university partners. If you're publicly funded, you can do work there as long as it's relevant to kind of DoD efforts. So think about that. It's just down the street. Think about the things that you can do there on either a 5G cyber network, a 5G test network, or a 5G research network to really hone in on what your value proposition is to Department of Defense. And I was telling Matt earlier that just recently there was a report that came out, which our former DepSecDef Bob Work chaired, and there were some things that I pulled out of there just kind of to make us think about these things, because we all know we need it, but it's great to be in a report, but can we do it? So one of them that pulled out was develop a national process for horizon scanning for emerging tech, right? That makes sense. It seems like that's easy to do. It is just like mission impossible, right? That I'm sure the report's going to blow up on its own. Government fund to move tech like 5G and AI from lab to market, right? Develop a tech alliance among democratic allies to coordinate policies, investments, et cetera. It's a 189-page report. Luckily, I work with a lot of smart people that can help pull out all these things. But I thought it would be important, especially for a group that focuses not just here locally, but focuses globally, right? Here's another one I would fully embrace network-based operations to give more power to smaller units that can act across land, air, and sea. A little bit of something that Matt was talking about. So this is how I make Matt look really good, right? I'm just validating some of the things that he's saying. Or maybe he wrote the report and Bob Work is taking. Undermine adversaries' ability to censor networking and media. Plan for what you can't plan for, because new asymmetric tools are changing faster than military doctrine, old-fashioned planning can keep up with. And then just this last one, develop war plans that attack biases and weaknesses in adversaries' AI by manipulating data amongst other techniques, right? My points there is that there are people in big government that's paying attention to this, and then there are the practitioners, the experts at a different level saying, how do we tie all those threads together to make the machine work? But to Joy's point about, hey, the contracting piece, and there are a lot of obstacles. I work with a lot of startups, right? I'll shamelessly say that I'm on several boards of different startups because I believe in what they're doing. I could also share I'm not on with some others because I think it's not value to what is important to me in the national security area. Not saying that it won't be viable commercially. It probably will be, and I'll probably be a broke guy watching them continue to be successful. But I'm really passionate about what we do in the national security arena. Like I tell some folks, I got twins that are going to be commissioning in May, and I want them to have that fight, that unfair fight that we all want our sons and daughters, nephews and nieces, grandsons and granddaughters to enjoy. So where our value proposition, where I'm at, is either in the research and partnership, to going after different proposals, but also in the test, demonstration, evaluation. What's nice is you might want to demonstrate or test something, and we just so happen to have a lot of the partners that might be interested already there. And we can just say, hey, come down and watch this test. It's going to be great. And if it solves a problem that DoD wants solved, then then I become match.defense.com, right? That I get, and I don't get any value out of that other than the fees for we're a nonprofit organization, right? There is the word profit in there, but it's only I'm hand to mouth. We got to feed our research engineers. We got to feed the people that make the thing go. But we're not into making profit. So that's my pitch. Hopefully, I made them look good by basically reading off these. We didn't rehearse it, but all these points are really just honing in on how smart Joy and Matt are. So thanks.
Hey, Ross, so just one question. So we talk about allies and partners needing to level up and not get out-innovated from us. If there was a Australian company that had a new piece of kit they wanted to trial out at BCDC, could they do that?
Yeah, so we've had Belgian companies come out. We've had Australian companies come out. We've had Canadian companies come out that are looking, we have to do work in the CUI environment. We have to do work in the classified environment. We do work in the ITAR environment. So those are all environments that we're familiar with. We do have some military folks on the staff, so we do hone in on that, and we do check in to make sure that we are not burning any bridges, so to speak, right? So that's important to us because our first major relationship was with Army Futures Command. We got an ONR rep up there. We got DOE presence there and getting larger. Ensign is up there. So we're really trying to blow that out to be that real national security research ecosystem, which includes, Houston College Station, Austin, San Antonio, and the Dallas Metroplex, right? That's really what our value proposition is. And it's not all about, let's keep it all in BCS, Bryan College Station. It really is like, how can we work with the different universities even to make sure that we can, reset and get these things quicker to the warfighter. So,
Yeah, it's really important. As a matter of fact, last time I was up there,
Yeah.
UT Austin was in the room with us.
Right.
You don't usually see Aggies and Longhorns hanging out together.
No.
But-
Unless
they're battling in Alabama, which might be a whole
It is
other thing.
fantastic, though. Just like anything else, competition really helps make things, better for the warfighter. UT Austin or Rice or any of the other universities, they work on specific things in their areas, and we're working like in other areas that Army Futures Command or AFRL or ARL wants us to work in. And usually it doesn't overlap, right? I know there are people that keep score, but we keep score for the nation, so.
All great to hear. I love it. So we're going to open it up for questions and answers. So love to hear your thoughts, insights, questions, or you'll hear me, or maybe Joy or Ross or Matt ask the panel the question.
Hi, thank you. A couple questions for you. One is there any way of making the ATO process less expensive and faster? And my thought is, if there was an internal review capability to go through that code, to be able to you can put search engines and bots through it to find a lot of stuff. But like we're CUI, we're being asked to go through IL 5, 6, and above as fast as possible. Well, we just hit a wall because of the cost and then the time that goes with that. Even though we built our code to be able to be used at that level, the certification process and the FedRAMP process is a hurdle that we just don't know how to get past. And we've got MAGCOMs that say, well, we're willing to sponsor you on this, but that's a slow-moving train. That's the first question. Second of all is we also, and I don't know how it's happened, but we now have other countries, in particular, I'll say Israel's one of them, that says they're willing to take our technology and move at lightning speed because they see how much faster it makes everything, but it's like pushing uphill to move through some of the areas inside of the DoD. I mean, we have pull in some areas, but to be able to get into areas, for instance, like the Army, that could really use this at a scalable position, it's pushing, whereas all of a sudden we just get a call out of the blue, out of the Israeli Defense Force that says, we're ready to move on this now. And we go, how did you even hear about us? So those are two sort of bigger issues that I wonder if you had some fundamental answers to.
Sure. So the first one, I'd say Dr. Iyer, our Army CIO, and his team, they are trying to take that ATO in a day process and move it forward. I think many in the department understand that is how things have been proven to be more secure in industry. Just, sometimes working through the muscle memory and implementing those new workflows are taking time. But I would say that at the highest levels of technical leadership within the Army, we're committed to that. The second's a bit tougher to answer. I would say that Project Convergence is an effort by the Army to open the field of play to non-traditional partners in a way where we've lowered the barrier somewhat for technology like yours to come prove its worth. I do think that we still have improvements to make to give you a venue, before we get it out to the desert to where you can show that value, right? Just my opinion, but I think a lot of our muscle memory in terms of model and sim almost runs straight to agent-based modeling, where for these type of problems, maybe it's a different framework where introducing some stochastics in different areas and then just automating the results downstream allow you to test for some of those things in a much more robust way. There is a segment within that community that is kind of leaning in that direction as well. So probably not a satisfying answer, but thanks. Always the voice of encouragement from the back.
All right, more questions?
Joe, you mentioned about contracting being contracts being the big hurdle. I'd like to go in that a little bit or dive into that a little bit more, if you don't mind. Is it time and just the complexity of it that we have in place, the bureaucracy of it, the red tape, or is it resistance from those who actually have the money to write the checks? Where's it at?
D, all of the above. No, I'll actually put some constraints on exactly what I'm talking about. We can kind of, beat the drum that, contracting's hard, but there's also a reason for checks and balances, right? So we're not just like lighting complete piles of cash on fire for no capability. So I'm actually not talking about, barrier to entry. I'm talking about for a small business to scale once they're in. So 1 or 2 contracts with a core customer, for example. And usually what occurs is there's buy-in from a government customer. There's no way to get to the small. And so what happens is the government customer ends up overpaying by, 3 or 4x markup because it's going to a prime, to a sub, to a sub, to a sub. And that's the government's prerogative to do that if that's the easiest way to get this capability, especially if it's anything where it's integrating on-site talent as well as technology, right, there specifically. What that does, the unintended consequence to, great, we can get you on, but you're going to be 4 subs down, is it compounds the payment terms to that small business by anywhere between 120 to 250 days, and small businesses just don't have that cash on hand, especially if you are not venture-backed, right? So for every person you're deploying, you have to have $30,000 to $40,000 of cash on hand to say, hey, we just won this big contract. Yay, we're so excited. 20 people to serve the Air Force. And then you multiply 20 people times $30,000. That'll kill a small business, right? And then it kills the relationships and the subs. So it's really actually that side of the contracting process and figuring out how to consolidate a little bit more and get better payment terms. The Small Business Office did a push about a decade ago to try to get to net 60, but it's kind of swung the other direction just by ease of, well, this is the best way to get to you, and then it compounds the capability, and then you're laying people off, and then there's a technical gap, so it all compounds. I'm really interested in figuring out how to solve that.
I got to add on to that. So there are two primary actors in every effort to buy something from commercial industry, and it's always the stakeholder and the acquisition command elements, right? And there isn't a conversation happening between the two of them. I mean, several people in this room, I know you have contracts with the DoD, and the people that you know that want the tool that you're providing, the ontology, the AI, the platform, are now, let's run the numbers, let's get the project. And the acquisition command are like, well, hold on, we're not done with the OTA yet. What did they say they wanted? And they're asking me as an industry partner to translate what the stakeholder wants. No, this is your dirty business, right? And I'm not playing a blame game here. I'm saying this, you got to own some of that conversation between an acquisition command and the stakeholders. The other thing, if something is important to the United States Army, will you please, please, please just give an acquisition cell to them? Why doesn't Army Futures Command have an acquisition cell in-house? Anybody?
I do, I know, but
500.
I can't say.
It's 500. Is it 500?
No?
500 and less. Okay. Well, that secret will be held by Ross. But
So.
but what I'm trying to get
Yeah,
at
I
is
get
if the functionality for innovation at scale to happen is acquisitions, then anyone who's doing innovation at scale needs to have an acquisition lead that in the hip pocket of a commander.
Right.
So
Well,
we had that at the Global Analytics Platform and JSOC. So
Yeah.
we had a commander who had come out of a special area in the aviation community. The first brief we gave him, he said, you need an acquisition officer.
right.
And having that expertise, that acquisition officer would come to my cell that was full of data scientists and intel analysts, see what we were doing, listen to my intent, ask great questions, and then adjust contracts and vehicles to help me retain the talent and get the proc hardware, all those kind of things. So oftentimes we talk about the disconnect between kind of technologists and the operator, but that third piece of the stool is the acquisition professional that knows how to make it a reality. Moving towards cross-functional teams, I think, is a way we got to go.
Yeah, and I also think too that we talk about how much we want to see the fruits of innovation and interoperability, whether that's between businesses, between services, between countries, between platforms. But really, the core community where that comes out of are people in the field, right, which is why soldier innovation funds exist and things like that, or small businesses. And so small businesses don't have the luxury to hold on long enough to, well, let me educate this government buyer, requirements shaper for 16 months. Like, they'll die before then. So anything we can do to, shorten that tail, I think there will be a direct correlation to innovation to field and a higher degree of interoperability.
So in one of my positions, I was the chief of staff for the Army Futures Command Task Force. So it was the task force that really focused on getting to yes for the big four, right? So we needed to make sure that all policies and regulations and laws were being adhered to by creating this command. And we actually used the military decision-making process with the big four every step. Every Friday, we briefed them. They gave us guidance. We retweaked our brief for the next Friday, and it just till they felt comfortable making the decision for the Army. Because remember, we're playing 7D chess. You had Congress, you had OSD, you had Joint Staff, all the other services, allies, industry. You had to satisfy everybody, but you had to satisfy them with, the foundation that you didn't kill anybody. So we were at a conference, and Miss Hsu, now, she wasn't the acquisition executive, or she wasn't the USD R&E. She pulled me aside and she said, if you don't own your own acquisition process, that will be your Achilles heel in Army Futures Command, Ross. And I was like, okay, and I go to the boss, I'm like, if we don't own our own acquisition, like, yeah, shut your cake hole and keep coloring. And, there was a lot of politics in why we didn't get it. It's not that we didn't know. We should have had our own, credentialed acquisition executives. What we did get out of that was priority from AMC, General Pernin, General Murray, with the handshake saying, you will have priority while I'm in command, right? Which is great, except, people change command, there was not even a picture of the handshake. And then what happens to your subordinate organizations? You might have it at the headquarters level, but your subordinate organizations are out there, fighting the fight, and they don't have that same, kind of situation awareness that was, gentleman's handshake. In my own experience outside of the military was we had RCV lights ready to test 2 years back, and we have them coming back actually, and GVSC was trying to figure out how to pay us. We didn't know how they could pay us because it couldn't go on the $65 million cooperative agreement. There was no ATM that was taking anybody's card at that time, right? So that was like our heart. Like, we had a customer that wanted to pay. We were ready to accept, and we couldn't, connect it. So you had to go through a pass-through, and you got a haircut on it, right? Then everybody has experienced that. They did nothing except they had a contract vehicle that we could use, and, we were light, whatever percent that we got, right? So, fast forward now, we're in a $100 million, roughly $96.2 million IDIQ, and, different rule sets. But, the Army, to AFC's credit, they're like, hey, we want industry to use that as long as the purpose is within the BAA, right? We welcome that because we were unsure from, BCD standpoint, like, who can use it, just Army? They're like, no, industry can use it on proposals if it's solving Army problems within the BAA, right? So we do have RCV lights coming back. I think we got that all, sorted out. My push to Army Futures Command is test or demonstrate some things there on the innovation proving ground and have smaller companies able to put their enabling technologies on there and then see if it works. I said, what are you going to prove or disprove? Sometimes they don't have the cash on hand to have their own razors or have all these different things that they can show the value on a ruggedized, 34 obstacle innovation proving ground, right? They don't have something that they can show on a fording site with cross current. They just don't have it. Well, we do. Well, if the Army's interested, put it on one of their vehicles and have it run. If it doesn't work, then it doesn't work. So that's kind of what we've been trying to push through is, or have one of the big defense primes leave vehicles there. If you're looking for enabling technologies, tell the small startups, I got a vehicle there, prove it, right? Not on PowerPoint, put it on the vehicle and prove it. And then we'll either help you scale, or if you want to talk about a merger or acquire, let's have that discussion too. And that's all outside of my remit. We're just trying to figure out who has the best stuff to get to the warfighter, right?
Oh, Harris is first. Sorry, Mike.
I'm not controlling this.
Open question to the panel. On the other side of the spectrum around innovation and acquisition, what are your thoughts on the SBIR, SETR process to engage with small companies and bring actual tools to the Army?
I've been around companies that they're SBIR hunters, right? That's what they live on, and they're on their 6th SBIR, but are you going to deliver? I mean, I think part of it is their strategy to, who they're going to partner with, if they're going to partner, and how they, are showing or demonstrating their capabilities, right? And STTR, the same thing. Again, what I try to advise startups and medium-sized companies, like, take it beyond PowerPoint and let's take the prototype and demonstrate it, because that will speak volumes to potential customers, even if we need to tweak it around the margins, right? The problem is working in, with academics is that they don't want to have anybody see them fail, right? And then in the Army, we say, hey, we're now in a culture where we can fail and learn from it, but still nobody wants to fail on the Army side either, because you have a failed program or failed, that's not usually good. It's really to me, it's a lot of the startups, they're like, damn, that thing didn't work, and here's the reason why. And then they go back and make it better, then they do it fast, and they can take it back out again, right? Again, so our innovation proving ground can collect the data. We have the bays to do, to do all the maker stuff to fix the hardware, and then the Fusion Center to fix the software. Bring it back together same day, depending on how hard the fixes are. Roll up the side and then take it back out quickly. It's not at Yuma Proving Ground. It's not being collated, at Aberdeen and some other places. It's all in-house to help make it go faster, right? That's the idea. Test, fix, test, fast as you can, just to keep running iterations through. But I've seen a lot of companies go through SBIRs and never get beyond SBIRs. But, maybe that's a 3-year trial they're continue to want to work.
Joy, we're running out of time, but do you have a comment on the SBIR? I saw that.
Oh, yeah, that's
Body language.
You got my soapbox, man. No, I'll be quick. I think that the biggest lie ever told to companies is just go get an SBIR. And that becomes their company strategy, right? I think SBIRs are very, very, very effective for specific niche, true S&T capabilities where you're trying to jump from like the low TRLs up. But I think SBIRs and SBI hunters, whether it's on the consultant side or the actual company side, can kill companies because a lot of times they're pre-revenue. So that's like, any major valley company where you see a headline that's like, oh, they raised $100 million, they must be amazing, and they don't have shit for a product yet, and then they go under like 24 months later. What I think is that a lot of small business companies count on the government to have it be the government's responsibility to grow you from SBIR 1 to 3, get purchased for $50 million, and that's going to be like your easy path to revenue. And I think it's like I said, the biggest lie. So I think they can be incredibly helpful, but I think 75% can actually kill companies because of the length of time it gets to capture, manage, deliver, find a resource sponsor, shake MOUs out of trees, say a prayer, and hope. That's it.
Love it. Love it. Well, thank you, lady and gentlemen, for engaging conversation. A round of applause for Matt, Joy, and Ross. Take a short break here to get the other panel up. By the way, if you want to start happy hour early, the keg is tapped over here with electric jellyfish. I think AFWorks has the geographic headwind. All right, panel 2, get on up here so we can keep you going. It's all good. Alex, how are you? Good, man.
Check.
Are you staying for the other panel, sir?
test.
Whatever you want.
Test.
It's just not. Test.
All right, come back in, or come back to your seats, or mingle, or do whatever you want to do. Except for Joy. No boxing, Joy.
I didn't know we were including martial arts. I would have said about my recent jiu-jitsu experience.
That's good. You have to cue on. So a little bit different look at this side of the panel. So a little bit more technical, a little bit more tactical, or they may level back up and go strategic on me, or operational for that matter. Doesn't really matter. But we're trying to round it out a little bit. A little bit different expertise here and a little bit different perspective from a standpoint of who's on the stage with you. But I've already introduced him, so I won't do that again. I'm going to hand it straight over to Evan for the starter.
All right, hey everyone, Evan Adams, previously a graphic designer, ended up joining the Army as an armor officer in good company. And then just recently switched to 26 Bravo, which is an information systems engineer. Funny enough, I never really thought of myself as a software developer, which is ironic because I just got picked up for the software factory in the Army. So I start tomorrow, so wish me luck. But it's funny because like my life took like a very dramatic turn about 2 years ago. I won Dragon's Lair Episode 1, which is 18th Airborne Corps' Innovation Challenge. And I proposed this range scheduling and planning application that was going to be awesome, but way beyond anything I could do. And then General Kurilla was like, that's really cool, you should make that. And I was like, yeah, are you going to give me a team? He's like, nah. So I ended up experimenting a lot in Teams, or rather Power Apps on Teams at the time. So I built it once, and then they gave me a team of NC State students. I built it again, and then finally I got a professional software development company to build it. So anyway, that's a whole other rabbit hole. But that changed my life dramatically. I got really into the software development piece and kind of the practice therein. I got to develop a couple things that Brian already mentioned, basically a COVID tracker, a vaccine app with my friend Brian Masters up at 18th Airborne Corps, and then finally Rangefinder, and then the most important thing I've done in my Army career so far, I think, which was DAVE, which is the Deployment Automation Visibility Enhancement for 18th Airborne Corps. DAVE came about at the late days of Afghanistan as we were pulling out. 82nd got an emergency deployment, so 1st Brigade went over to HKIA, Hamid Karzai International Airport, and they basically secured the airfield so everyone, all the citizens could get out. So when they did that, it was a little bit of a problematic deployment, mainly because Fort Bragg, Pope Army Airfield on Fort Bragg, was shut down at the time. So they all had to go out of Charleston, South Carolina, which caused a little bit of a flash to bang issue of the priorities and the issues going out of Bragg were not the same in priorities and problems that they had in Charleston, right? And so there was a lot of phone calls and emails and Excel and PowerPoint documents going back and forth to try to solve that. And that wasn't good for anybody. On top of that, they had a pretty precarious tactical and political situation developing forward. And it caused a bit of an issue with personnel and equipment. My boss at the time, Colonel Molly Salisbury, part of the co-director of Project Ridgeway at 18th Airborne Corps, called me up and asked me if I knew anything about emergency deployments. And coming from an airborne unit, I was like, yeah, I do. And she goes, great. So you should come to Fort Bragg, like soon. I said, like, how soon? She's like tomorrow. So I packed my bag, threw it in the car, and drove to Fort Bragg. And then I became the de facto product owner for what would eventually become Dave. But at that time, it was me, a data scientist, David Moore, and a database engineer, Chad Naylor, out of 18th Airborne Corps as well. And we set about a pretty rapid and violent discovery and solution generation process at 18th Airborne Corps. We talked to a bunch of the staff, specifically the 1, the 4, the SPO, so the personnel, the logisticians, and the movement executors, as well as the Air Force on Fort Bragg and a lot of the key command there at 18th Airborne Corps, to kind of get our hands on what the overall real problem was. Because my only guidance was pretty much like, hey, fix it, Evan. We gave you all this training, go forth and conquer. So in our discovery process, we quickly realized that we needed a cross-domain solution, and it was going to be pretty complex. That's where Palantir's Vantage came in, and they basically threw a team on the table for me to use as I needed. So that was awesome as a product owner. Now I have a lot of horsepower, data guy, 2 data guys, and now I'm kind of going forth to make things, right? So what, right? So we ended up building a simulation for the deployment workflow. So how do units get out of Fort Bragg, to encompass as well Charleston at that time, but long-term project was Bragg, right? So since we built that simulation, we could test some of these theories and kind of choose our favorite, right? Or the ones that work the best, and kind of validate some of those assumptions. The other thing we did was we took the soldier and the equipment input, which was a bunch of per stats and log stats, basically a bunch of Excel documents, and we made them data objects in a common data fabric, right? So now we can enrich that data with their, basically where they're at and what they're doing, their status. And that was an easy way to both get all on the same page from CONUS, so Fort Bragg, Charleston, and forward at Germany, Kuwait, and Afghanistan. And we could all kind of collaborate and speak off one truth. But also, we were able to then develop web applications based on that to help some of the decision-making and communication aspects. So now, when General Kurilla looked at the picture, it wasn't a question of how valid is this. Every number on there had a name tied to it. So that was a huge win for all of us. I was quite proud of that, and I was quite proud of the team. But in order to do that, we had to really build a team mid-flight in a very dynamic situation. And because of that, there was really kind of looking back, 3 big things that I held on to. The first and foremost was we were coming from all over the place. So I was at Fort Campbell. I had 2 folks at Fort Bragg. The Palantir team had a rep on site, but then 2 teams in DC and California. So communication was key. And this is not groundbreaking, so I'm sorry to let you down, Brian. Communication's key, and we basically kept a running document of all our lessons learned, all our engagements, our stakeholders, and anytime we onboarded anybody, it was a quick, down and dirty, hey, this is where we're going. We all agreed on that problem and that problem statement, and we all understood the assignment, so to speak. The second thing is DoD innovation is a violent contact sport. Like I've heard boxing, I prefer grappling and jiu-jitsu. It's the same thing. It's just a constant give and take, and it's mainly taking a lot of face shots. But once you find the right people to talk to, you got to cherish them, and it's rank agnostic. It doesn't matter. I mean, we were talking everyone from 3-star General Kurilla to an E5 punching in numbers on a per stat. So find those people, listen to them, and show them that you're listening by enacting change, which was what Vantage's team really gave us, is we could make those lightning fast corrections and give them products to solve their problems quickly. Because as soon as they can go around you easier than they can use your product to do, you're lost. And the last thing, and it's been mentioned, again, not groundbreaking, but we reward and we focus on the learning and the understanding, not the solution, right? There were several instances where Dave just wasn't the right fit, so we scrapped it, we killed it, and we went in a different direction. We pivoted quickly. oftentimes you see that the other way around, where they have a solution and they want to find that problem. We kind of left our egos at the door and really looked for the right solution to fit these problems. And those were kind of like the three main tenets. It's not like I wrote those down and like shouted them from a rooftop. It was just something that helped our team come together under a common goal and helped align us. So with that being said, thanks for having me, and I'm open for any questions or.
We'll hold their questions to last, but I'm going to double click on something. So you said cross-domain, so cross ILs, right?
Yes.
And you were developing a solution kind of in stride. So how did the ATO happen? Was it underneath the breadth of Palantir?
Yes.
Okay.
Which is why that solution ultimately.
Note to smalls, find somebody big like Palantir when you need cross-domain solutions to get through the ATO process. Because cross-domain solutions that aren't, secret, top secret, NIPR, are normally their own ATO process. But when you use all three, it's a cheetah flip.
Yeah. And Palantir is
Maybe
not paying me anything,
Lindy,
but.
triple Lindy. Yeah, it's good. No, it's good to know, though. That's really good stuff. Alex, take us away.
All right. Hey, everybody. Alex Height, Vice President at Visma, down here, rather, from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So I think I might be coming at this from maybe the smallest company size. So we're at 24 people right now. So how do we innovate for defense at that size? It's very hard. When I came on board at Vismo, I think I was the fourth hire. So over that time, it's been about 3 years. We've started to look at some things. I'm going to open myself up to something that you're going to be able to knock me down for in a moment, right?
No worries, I got you.
SBIRs, STTRs, we've talked about this. We know what you think. I agree with you.
know,
I agree with
You
you.
don't know yet. You'll know soon.
And they have a time and a place. I'll leave it at that. But more importantly, we found other types of ways to do defense innovation. OT for prototype, subcontracting with primes, and learning a lot from the man sitting two to my right, who's been a really good friend to us and a good mentor to a lot of small businesses. And I think that's really the main focus for me. There's very little that we and other small businesses can do on our own. I think one of the biggest things that we can do well is partner and learn from other people who've been in this space before us and know a lot more than we do. So one of the things that we, so my title, my department, yeah, we're business development. But partnerships and strategy is what we title our business development team, because we really think about it as partnering and building relationships and being able to look at universities for STTRs and really find someone who can bring a subject matter expertise or a relationship to working with us that we don't already have. Or if it's with a large business, being able to actually learn from them and help to bring something that they want forward, or be able to work with them collaboratively and develop a new technology for the Army or somebody else in defense space. We've had, over the past 3 years, more than our fair share of stumbles, but I think that's only made us more willing to keep on trying to grow in this space. I think the contracting questions is, I could spend the next 2 days talking about that with somebody, because I think it's a lot that that knowledge base is something that small businesses really need to develop, but also experience on their own to be able to really get the reps and be able to understand there are ways around it. So we've heard boxing, we've heard jiu-jitsu. I'd say getting beat up is another, contact sport we could talk about. So, yeah, but I think, I'll give you a concrete example, and then I'll turn it over to Brian for how, we try to be innovative and look at interoperability. One of the projects that we work on focuses on how we as a small business collaborate with USMA. They're our research partner. It's for an Air Force contract. And then we're publishing through Air Force Cyber College a case study. And all of these organizations are then able to work together to create a toolkit that can be used for graduate students that are either uniformed or civilian that are taking cyber law courses. So, there's this desire that we're seeing for people to work together and use the same types of tools, even though it might be a very, limited experience.
No, I appreciate it. It's always interesting. When we first met and talked about COIAS, I knew it was something very unique. And it's interesting how you see very small companies they're finding riches in niches, right? And that there's a place and time for things that are very needed, that are very specialized. And then if you can land and expand like you were just discussing, it takes it a whole nother level. Angela, will you bring us home?
I can do my best.
That's right.
Yeah. So Angela Speedo, I'm the Senior Vice President of Strategy and Growth for MKS2 Technologies, which is actually a technology company based here in Austin. We planted our flag at Capital Factory very serendipitously just a few months before Army Futures Command did. So we've been really inside of all of the ongoings in the evolution of the defense ecosystem here in Austin. And when I first got here back in 2018, we have a lot in common, Alex and I, just in terms of the day-to-day battles and going 15 rounds with the FAR for a boxing reference. Sometimes what it feels like. One of the things that I think makes MKS2 unique, and kind of this perspective that I'm bringing here, Brian, is we have contracts that are FAR-based contracts, and we have OTA contracts. So we're one of the few small businesses, I think, that has seen both sides and had success and had a couple of learning opportunities on both sides, right? So that's kind of, my orientation. I loved the panel before. I thought you guys did such a great job of just articulating some of the challenges you had. And I want to bring it back up because it's sort of the focus of my dialogue today is that you know nothing about me and I know nothing about you, and that is the crux of our problem, right? I don't believe, and I can't imagine that anybody, after hearing Colonel Benini and Colonel Gibb and Joy speak, I don't think anybody could agree that we have a technology problem. We certainly don't have a lack of ideas, a lack of innovation, a lack of interest, a lack of big brains, right, assigned to solving problems. What we have is a problem with communication and access, right? And that is at the core of everything that keeps me up at night. I cannot get to my customer directly. I cannot talk to the product owner directly without 17 chaperones and 15 emails and the guy from legal sitting in the room making sure that we don't cross any FAR lines or DFAR lines or any of that stuff, right? That's terrifying for a small business, terrifying. And how many people go out into the world inside of our government and from the SBA and all the DoD commands and talk about how small business is the backbone of innovation in our community, right? And we're leveraging thousands of small businesses every single day to bring new technologies to the government, and that's total crap, right? Sorry, no offense. But that's kind of what it is, right? It's so hard for a small business to break through all those barriers, that the current existing culture has created. It's so challenging for customers like Major Adams, Colonel Benini, to get to the person who's actually going to solve their problem, right? And if you're a small business inside of this space, you either have to accept a SIBR, and try to survive on $250,000 over the next 18 months, which is impossible for anybody who has even an administrator on their staff, right? Or you have to sell your soul to one of the large companies that has the vehicle to give you access. So again, I think we have an access issue, and I think we have a communication issue. But I think they're solvable. So you know, I was a change management consultant back in the day, right? This is a change management problem. We can totally do this, right? We can figure this out. How to resolve it is not going to be the biggest issue we'll resolve in our time, right? I think there are three major things that everyone can do across all the platforms, right? So if I was thinking about what I would say right now, industry, academia, governments, right, nonprofits, how do we all come together and fix the problem right now? Well, we all have to work on three things, right? The first, and I made notes on loose leaf paper, just in case any of you have junior high children at home and you were wondering if it still exists, it does. The first is we need to foster some empathy, right? I cannot know what my customer needs unless I can talk to my customer, right? My customer cannot know what I can deliver unless they can talk to me. I cannot know what my contracting officer is facing if I don't get to talk to them, right? Real, open, honest conversations about our stakeholders, our objectives, our incentives, right? So that we can really understand each other. That's the first thing that I think we really need to resolve. The second thing is standards. And I don't mean more rules or laws, right? I mean standards, right? Have you ever built something without standards? Have you ever done something without documentation? Have you ever, like, you know, just winged it? It sucks, right? But if you have standards, if we could put some standards for access, standards for communication in place, right? They can live inside the FAR, they can live inside DFARS, whatever acronym you want to put in the umbrella is fine with me. But let's set the standard so that my contracting officer is not terrified to tell me what I need to know. And my customer is not afraid to tell me something they shouldn't, right? And then I am not terrified, you know, from day one of the project that I'm giving you the wrong thing or doing the wrong thing, right? Because I know what you need and I know how to give it to you, right? And then the third thing, on the topic of access, right? We don't need more OTAs. We don't need more consortium. We don't need more places to have to go dig around and find, because most small businesses who really want to get to you and they really want to innovate with you, they can't find you because you're in 56 different places, or they're in the 5 places that you're not, right? We do not need more vehicles. We just need standards of access. Okay, and then the last thing before I jump off my soapbox, we need to break some bad habits, right? We've got a lot of bad habits everywhere. Okay, I'll start with industry, right? I can pick on myself. I have a good sense of humor, right? Industry is built on an entitlement culture. How many have worked for or been the guy in the room who was like, well, what do you mean you're not going to give me that contract? I just went through 15 rounds of conversations and 3 oral evaluations. You know, there's this expectation that just because I was willing to do the hard work, you're going to write me a check. We've got to let that go, right? We also, as industry, I think, have to stop blaming the FAR for our access problems, okay? Because we do that a lot. It's like the crutch, you know, that nobody needs. If we're in, like, you know, pull up the couch and sit on the self-help, you know, dialogue, right? Like, stop blaming the FAR for all the problems you have. Go hire a really good former contracting officer and figure it all out. That's what I did, and it was brilliant. Okay. On the government side, you know, I think we got to get off the merry-go-round of, I'm going to do what I've always done, and I'm going to get something different this time. Because that's what we're doing, right? Round and round we go, and if you keep doing what you've always done, you're going to get what you've always got. So a good example of this, right? MKS2 had an OTA award. We were a DIU awardee for a prototype build, and we won because we told the government that we could make this beautiful dream that they had happen, right? They wanted to know, can I build this thing? Is it possible? And we were like, hell yeah, it's possible. Anything's possible, right? Give me a few smart people and a couple of hours with a whiteboard and I have got you. So we told them we could do it, and we told them how much it was. And they said, great, but we don't know you. So we want to attach you to someone we know. And that someone they knew was a large business that had played in their space for 20 years. And at the end of a 3-week, down the aisle conversation to get my OTA award, my timeline doubled and my cost doubled. And my big partner that they put with me to lower my risk profile only had 20% of the level of effort. So you cost the taxpayer twice as much money for a prototype that wasn't even gonna live in a real environment, right? It was gonna exist in my super cute little production environment on AWS, right? It was gonna live there, and you still forced me to charge you twice as much, right? That's such an example of like how this whole process fails us, right? And why I think really strongly that we have an access issue and a bunch of bad habits to break, right? Colonel Gibb left, so I won't go into academia's problems. Thanks.
No, thank you for that. And it's really good. I love the bad habits piece. And I think nearly everybody in the room that's been with an acquisition professional and a stakeholder has seen something gone wrong where it could have done far better if we just thought through the process. We're at the point now to open it up for questions and answers. Who wants to go? Mike Garlington's going to go first.
All right, yeah. So
There's no wrong answer. It's your perspective.
the interoperability piece might be tough, but the innovation piece at least, it's just the ability to fail. Like, if you have the ability to take a risk and fail without completely falling on your sword and being cast aside as like, well, that guy's never going to get KD. Like, at least within the Army, there's not a lot of that comfort level. The only reason I got to do it was because for the longest time, I've been like a terminal officer. I swear, like every year, I'm like, I'm getting out, man, I'm getting out. And then like, I don't. And so like, so to me, I would always just take a swing. And it didn't really bother me, but I'm kind of an edge case. But yeah, the ability to take a risk, fail, and say, hey boss, this product didn't really answer that question. But here's what we learned, and here's how we would do it next time. And this is how we should pivot this project to make a new product that does answer that question. So.
Way to go. Broke the rule, set a new standard.
Major Adams, my question would be in exactly the lane that you just said, that you personally, as an Army officer, had a higher risk tolerance than perhaps some of your peers. How would we get the acquisition folks to also admittedly have a higher risk tolerance, right? It has to be blended, right? It has to be on a mirror. Because at the end of the day, no different than, for example, you trying to go to get a small business loan, a banker is going to be risk averse to the nth degree. How do we force the hand on the acquisition side? Or perhaps, better yet, how do we widen the guide rails so that they have a little bit wider berth to bounce in between as they collectively have those conversations?
So not having an acquisitions background at all, I'm just going to like throw it out there. But I mean, if you look at like private industry, and again, not being a private industry guy, I'm going to take a wild guess though. But like again, the ability to fail at a set budget. So if you have a certain price cap that needs to be at, that's great. But pushing it as far down as possible, honestly, away from the acquisitions side and more towards the like Army side, like man, I'm going to sound like a total jerk. The real Army side, of like FORCECOM units or COCOMs, and giving them the ability to kind of make those money decisions and then inform the greater acquisitions process. I think that would be a way. Again, not an acquisitions guy. I didn't even stay at a Holiday Inn Express or whatever that is. But that's what I'm going to throw out there.
Yeah, I mean, I would add, they fail every day, right? So like what we're doing right now is we're forcing them to go through a whole bunch of time and energy and money wasting paperwork drills to cover their asses when they fail, right? We like covering your butt in a failure situation is probably taking and draining more resources than we would if we had a conversation about being allowed to fail, right? So I totally agree with what you just said. Like, again, this is a change management thing, right? We're incentivizing the wrong things. We're also incentivizing things at every level that are completely opposite of what the person on the other side of the table from us is incentivizing, right? So the government's incentivizing something that is in direct opposing force to what I'm incentivizing on the industry side, So we can't be friends. Like we cannot, that doesn't work, And then on top of that, yeah, we've created this culture where failure is associated with a whole lot more work. So I'd rather just not take the risk of fail because I don't want to do that report, or I don't want to do that thing, or I don't want to be in trouble, right? But the reality is, guys, we're failing every single day. So I'd rather fail in front of the world and talk about it and create a safe environment to do that and do some lessons learned, as a part of this and find some transparency.
You want to jump in before?
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's certainly one view that you both are sort of on the same side of. The other approach that I think is more where I'm aligned to is a policy one. And I think there has to, and you sort of said this with your standards, I think there needs to be some sort of more legislative and policy-focused action around how to make that occur.
Yeah, I mean, on my project with IBM, a little bit of AI happening with DCMA, we had a conversation about how we weren't making the standards, and the acquisition officer, of course, put it in a memo and sent it to IBM Contracts and Negotiation, which stalled the project for exactly 182 days. They replaced the program manager, they replaced the program executive. So this is the hyper reaction of blue tape, not the red tape. And so what happened? What happened, Big Army? It was a $4.2 million project for that option year. And we got nothing done for 182 days. Because we couldn't pick up a phone? I mean, we have MS Teams or WebEx. Hell, we can go to Zoom if you want to. Come on. I go back to your first point, honest conversation. If I'm not meeting the standards, I'm a retired Army colonel. Let's have a conversation. I know how to meet a standard, right? And it's, by the way, we're contractually or OTA binded. I don't know why you say that because an OTA is technically not a contract. But look, have the conversation. Be two humans. That's the way to go, I think, Brendan. Can you incentivize people having dignity and respect across what I'd say, like, normal boundaried areas like acquisition, the real Army, industry, academia? Just have the conversation. That's where the greatness happens. I mean, it's hopefully happening more and more, but that's what I think is a great place. It is happening right now. But but at the point where, is there an acquisition officer in the room? Yes. Well, former. Recovering. But, yeah. I just wanted to get, he doesn't have the don't make him talk on a mic. But you know,
Give me a sec.
it's all
I'm
good.
a contracting guy, not acquisition. I'm a contracting guy. So
Okay.
The lone contracting guy in the room. So
Cool.
what I'll tell you is corporate empathy is one thing that RapidX, my other pet project, we're trying to espouse. We have 300 of 8,400 contracting folks signed up with us, so we're getting there. We're getting close. Sitter, please, please, please keep in mind the context. It's commercialization. It's not tech transition. It's not written in the policy. So we're along for the ride, and then best of luck in the future. So that's not a corporate strategy, period, dot. And you talked about, Joey mentioned 18 months at Capital Runway. 100%. I tell contractors every day when I talk to them, especially on server, we've had this conversation. Go commercial, then come back to me, and we'll see what happens. As far as contracting goes, if I have money, I can award anything in the world. I will get you CS. Now, that's me. You may not have had the same experience, but we'll get there. In year of execution budget is the key, period. Flexibility in program offices specifically is the key. I can't adopt you if I can't fund you, period. So it's not a contracting problem, change the vernacular. It's an acquisition problem. Specifically, it's a budgeting problem. So a lot more thoughts, but I'll leave it there for right now. Thanks.
No, I appreciate it. Thanks for jumping on a grenade that was rolling out. Your fault, Mike. I think Mike started the whole thing. Another question.
So I wanted to pull the thread on the tolerance for failure, right? Project convergence is an opportunity for technologies to get into the hands of the warfighters. And I'm just curious in the room or on the panel if anybody's had any experience where failure has occurred because a capability was demonstrated and it didn't meet its demonstration goals, right? And then what happened as a result of that? Was it a lessons learned that the government was able to inform the contractor, the provider, so that they could come back and try again, right? And because if they make it to the demonstration, they probably got a lot of stuff right. There's just some things that need to be tweaked or fixed or whatever. So I'm curious on that count, if there's any experience in that. And is Project Convergence helping industry to get capability into the hands of the warfighter?
Matt Scott.
So, I mean, I'm going to half answer your question because, again, limited experience here. So we took a technology to Project Convergence last year in a very limited capacity because it wasn't exactly to where we wanted it to be at that stage. Lessons learned. We're going back this year, and it's going to be a lot more functional. So I think, you know, it wasn't quite a failure because we knew going into it that it wasn't really going to be fully operational. Going into it this year, it better be.
Yeah, we've had some examples, particularly with 18th Airborne Corps. So this is my term, not the commands, but I think we've got readiness-focused innovation and then modernization-focused innovation, which are different timelines, right? But 82nd and 18th Airborne Corps deployed with kit and capability that they tested in the desert and took out to support, being prepared to support Ukraine. So, there is an example of technology getting to the warfighter quickly, the warfighter saying bueno, and going and using it operationally.
The question is the failure. What hasn't? The question is what has failed? I've attended every Project Convergence Industry Day and Outbrief, and not once have I heard a list of here's what's failed and what we're continuing to work on. I mean, there's other folks in the room that have probably been in those same meetings.
Yeah, and I think that what I was looking for was if I show up with a capability and it fails, and maybe I didn't know it was going to, right? Maybe I had set some standards and the government had set some standards and said we wanted to see it do these things, and it doesn't quite make it because, stuff happens. Does that become a invitation to come back and fix it? Or is it another example of, well, okay, we knew that it was only going to go this far. We're going to go back to the lab. We're going to work on this. We're going to make it work better and then come back later. And know that there's an open door to come back later.
Yeah, I personally, that's not, my section of responsibility within the command. I know that, with research and development efforts within DevCom, there is that feedback cycle that allows, in an experiment for there to be feedback and iteration. How well that gets generalized out to smaller businesses so you get the feedback that allows you to iterate, I can't speak to. But, being here and listening to that perspective today, I definitely can take that back to the head shed and pull that thread. So,
If I could add some context as well. You mentioned the 18th Airborne Corps and the 82nd efforts. That was in large part some of the lessons we learned in Afghanistan as well. So I can't give you a specific example, but some of the hangups that we had there, applied lessons learned to make a better capability going to Poland to support Ukraine. And the big key part of that is like having a landing space and kind of a beachhead there. To sing 18th Airborne Corps praises, I think that's what they're doing right out there, is they have kind of a panel of me's that can be like, this makes sense, this like is what's going right, and this is what's going wrong, and can kind of serve as that sounding board to guide something away from failure and more towards answering the problems we had. Granted, I shortly went on leave and left that organization, but at that time, that's kind of what we did, and that was kind of the secret to the success there.
Outside of Project Convergence, our experience in MKS2 has been one where failure was not appreciated by, our customer on the government side. And, in spite of some challenges, right, that we faced in the discussion, we had 4 product owner changes in the course of 6 months on the customer side with the prototype we were building. And in spite of a TS clearance and an entirely cleared personnel on the project build, we still were not allowed access to the high side environment, so we built in a total vacuum, right? And so when we went, to deliver the prototype and test it inside of the customer networks, it failed. And, here I am scrambling to get 6 people to stay in Maryland, over the course of a weekend, to work inside of a skiff to try to fix it, right? And the customer definitely was frustrated. And hindsight's always 20/20, right? If we had the type of feedback loops and open conversation that Major Adams was just talking about, we wouldn't have failed, but I don't think. But even if we had, I think it would have been a much more open environment to that, right? We would have just been able to talk about why a little bit better, and I think the customer would have felt a lot better about our ability to fix it. So everything corrected and worked again in 3 days' time, which I think is pretty great in terms of a timeline, right? But it felt like a black mark on the whole project, right? And that never feels good, to think from my perspective that you've just disappointed your customer, right? So, but again, that's outside of Project Convergence, so I can't really speak to, how that facilitates anything differently.
Not really a question, but maybe more of a comment. So I'm not surprised it costs twice as much. Look at the process, right? When I left the Marine Corps and jumped over to the industry side, one of the questions I asked is, why are we bidding on something we've not done, and we're promising we're going to make it happen and we're going to get it right, and years in advance, and on a firm fixed price contract, right? I'm like, this is like madness. And then I look at the bid and go, oh, okay, I see why, right? And that's what's happening is the whole culture has been built around bid all that risk in. Really, bid all the risk in. It's there, right? It's in the price. That's why it costs twice as much for you, because of that. And from a fail standpoint, I think one of the things we got to look at is when you look at the acquisition process, sit down and actually try to create one of those RACI matrices, right? Who are you listing and who's got control? And do it by time. Who's got control when? You've got to manage all kinds of different personalities, I'll say, okay? And there's a lot of being risk averse in those personalities, depending on the roles too. We have to have it this way. This contract's written this way, and it's got to be exactly that. There's no swing. There's no, hey, okay, can we like rework this thing because we discovered something? No, it's the contract, right? So, you know, we've got to look at every aspect from every stakeholder and how we're doing this. I'll tell you, if you go to the user community, okay, you go to the field, you're going to get lots of room to fail because they're going to be like, oh, that didn't work out so well. Oh, but if you do this. But now you get further away from that user community and it's much, much more risk averse. And part of that is also politically driven. Nobody wants to stand in front of Congress and explain why their, you know, contract is costing more or why something failed because it's now out in the media because somebody leaked that and made it a big to-do for political reasons. So there's all kinds of tentacles in this.
For sure. I mean, number one rule of GovCon, don't end up in an orange jumpsuit, right? Like, isn't that sort of like the guiding principle, right, for all of us? You know, that's a horrible thing, and it's fear-based, and it's terrible. Quick question, if I could layer in just real quick. The initial comment was about your experience in a large business or a small business? Large business, yeah. So, so I think I understand why the large business is important to the government. I totally get that. And we have been very fortunate at MKS2 to find a lot of really great large business partners that want to provide opportunities for access, right, and want to help us solve challenges. I do feel like the medium-sized small business is totally underrated, right? Totally underrated, and probably should get, you know, a step up on the pedestal from my perspective, because if you have made it to 25 million a year in revenue, you've seen it all, done it all, you know, you've buried everybody, and you've, you know, exorcised all the demons, right? And you know what it takes. Yeah, and you're not in an orange jumpsuit, sure. You know what it takes to get something to the customer, and you're also still that perfect size where you still care about speed and scale, right? You're not being driven by the bottom line. You don't have all of that excess pressure coming about ROI, you know, and just bottom lines and margins, right? And so for me, I feel like, you know, two major players in the future of getting innovation to the customer are that medium-sized small business, the guy who still cares about the mission, right? And academia. I really think academia has an opportunity to bridge so much for us. You know, Ross was just talking about $167 million open vehicle. Like, why are we not using that every day? You know, like, I'm gonna call him and ask him, why am I not using that every day? So for me, as I think about like the future forward, I think about, you know, more integrated academic programs that allow for that conversation, really smart guys like Ross who are willing to bridge that gap for us, and the medium-sized small business that can help that tiny guy get that technology to the government as quickly as possible.
No, I mean, it's really good. So we're coming up on time, and first of all, I want to thank everybody, especially this panel, for broadening, expanding the first panel's conversation. I think the discussion's been awesome throughout the afternoon. I really like there's something that I need to pull out here, and I think, Joy, you mentioned it. I know, Angela, you mentioned it. I think it's obvious in some of the comments from Major Adams. So there's three types of innovation: technical, procedural, and human. But any success depends on the humans to interact and interact well. And you went back to it. I mean, your very first point was, let's have some honest conversation, some honest, transparent conversation. You can have all the best procedures and all the best technology in the world, but if you don't trust that technology and you can't share them with your allies and partners, We're going to be the 21st century army of the future without any allies playing with us. Especially if we overprice it, which you tend to do to that too, right? So I really wanted to kind of pull a thread on that one and just kind of highlight it as something I really am going to go away with or take away. But anyway, so please join me in a round of applause for our second panel, Evan, Adam, and... So we're going to hang out. We've got some ice cold beer from Pint House Pizza. We have some startups who have come along to show us some of their wares and have conversation with us. In order to AI, Konami, and Parasanti. So please visit their tables and have conversation with them. Obviously, this is an opportunity to network and have collaboration and conversations that you normally don't have. So I'm hoping I provide that platform, and we provide that platform as IBM and Capital Factory. Thanks again for coming out today. And before I go, I'm going to give it over to Meg to give us a warm-up for Fed Supernova that's happening, is it
In 2
11
weeks?
days?
I'll get-
Oh, it's
I'll
true,
get into
14?
it.
Okay, I'll let you go.
Okay,
All right,
thank you.
thank you.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
My name is Meg Vrabel. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer and Head of Innovation here at Capital Factory. This is a commercial, but we've locked the doors, so don't make it awkward for me. Don't try to sneak out the back. Okay. This year's Fed Supernova is brought to us by IBM. We're really excited for their partnership. It kicks off on the 27th of this month, so we're just under 2 weeks, and it kicks off with one of our signature crawls. Have you guys, who's been to a crawl? Okay, they are fun. There's a lot of food, there's a lot of drinks, and there are a ton of startups ready to showcase whatever the innovation that they specialize in. Many of them are dual use. So the 28th and the 29th, full programming, workshops, panels, fireside chats, the whole shebang, 2 full days. I'm going to pull an Oscar speech right here because I don't want to forget anyone, but they include Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense, Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Army Acquisition, Logistics, and Technology, NGA, IBM, DIU, NavalX, AFWorks, DARPA, 75th Innovation Command, AAL, MITRE, UTD, Raytheon, Deloitte, and some more. But they were the ones that paid me to say that, so. For all of you guys here, we'd like to give free access. If you go to fedsupernova.com, you can register with the code FREESL, all caps, F-R-E-E, Sierra Lima, all caps for free access to the entire event. So short, just free, F-R-E-E-S-L, all caps. And you can reach out to anyone that works at Capital Factory and we can help you out as well. So with that, thank you. See you there. And beat me.
Absolutely, I'll be there with bells on. So thanks once again. Thanks, Meg, very much. And thanks one more time for Capital Factory for helping us put this whole thing on. And enjoy yourself in happy hour. And we'll talk to you real soon.